You know how sometimes you get this feeling like you're just dipping your toes into some really deep
Oh,
ideas,
yeah, totally. Like there's a whole ocean of understanding out there.
but you don't have the time or maybe even the energy to really like swim out into the depths.
Exactly.
Well, today we're going deep. Think of it like we're giving you, the learner, scuba gear for your mind.
Love that analogy.
We're diving into a perspective that honestly just might shift the way you see yourself and the world.
And maybe even the whole cosmic play, right?
Right. We've been poring over this morning reflection, a weighty,
Mhm.
and it's packed with insights.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's not your typical spiritual text.
No, not at all. By the end of our little deep dive here,
Sure.
I bet you'll be looking at ideas like um, knowledge, purity, even history with fresh eyes.
Yeah, it definitely throws some curveballs at concepts we might think we're familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
Ready to jump in.
Let's do it. Okay, so right off the bat, this reflection says the present moment is very, very invaluable.
Not just valuable, very, very valuable. I mean, what makes now so special?
Well, it talks about moving beyond limitations into the unlimited. But what does that actually mean, like practically speaking?
So the limitations are all the things we usually use to define ourselves, right? Gender, job, nationality, even our bodies.
Right, all that stuff.
But the unlimited is about tapping into that part of us that's beyond all that, the soul.
The soul.
Yeah. It's realizing that we're not just these separate, limited beings, but part of something much bigger,
It's a big shift in perspective.
huge, and it can unlock so much potential.
And this idea of being world benefactors,
Right,
it's a
right.
pretty lofty goal.
It is, but I think it comes down to, when we connect with that unlimited part of ourselves, that peace, that love, it just naturally radiates outwards.
It's like a ripple effect.
Exactly. And that's how we become world benefactors,
Yeah.
just by being and by sharing this understanding with others.
Okay, so this reflection asks this really central question. It says, by what effort is the right to the Father's inheritance obtained? So it's like, how do we earn this spiritual inheritance?
Yeah, there's effort involved for sure. And the answer is, well, surprisingly simple and incredibly challenging at the same time.
I'm intrigued. What is it?
It's about consistently seeing everyone as souls, brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
beyond gender, beyond any superficial difference.
Wow,
Yeah,
it sounds hard.
it is. It says that very clearly, letting go of this bond, this awareness of gender is very difficult.
Why is that such a hurdle? I mean, we're practically hardwired to see gender everywhere we look.
Totally. Our roles, our interactions, everything is influenced by it. To consistently see the soul in everyone, that takes real effort.
It's like rewiring our brains almost.
It is. It's going against a lifetime of conditioning. And that brings us to the importance of De Abhimani.
Yeah, Bhimani. Okay, break that down for us.
Okay, so De means body, and Abhimani means attached to or, having ego in.
So it's all about being body conscious.
Yeah, it's that strong identification with our physical form.
And to earn the inheritance, we have to practice the opposite.
Exactly. Become the Ahiman Mukta, free from that body consciousness. Constantly remember, I am a soul, and this body is just a temporary vehicle.
It's a complete identity shift.
It is.
From physical to spiritual.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does seeing the Supreme Soul as the Father connect to this whole inheritance idea?
Well, just like in the material world, children inherit from their parents, right?
Right.
Spiritually, it's the same. By recognizing the Supreme Soul as our Father, we're establishing that relationship that makes us eligible for his inheritance. And that inheritance is like the ultimate treasure: peace, purity, power.
Our soul's original qualities. But the reflection mentions that only those who become Sadapranhan through remembering the Father receive this full inheritance of liberation and liberation in life.
Right. So Sato Pradhan literally means Sato, truth, and Pradhan, dominant.
Dominant in truth, okay.
Exactly. It's the state of the soul when it's at its purest, most elevated, like a battery at full charge. And it's achieved by, constantly remembering the divine, and also by actively shedding those impurities, those negative thoughts and actions, all that stuff that weighs us down.
Okay, so the reflection then jumps into some key terms, starting with Om. It explains it as Aham Atmamam Sharir, I am soul, my body. Why is this particular understanding of Om so important?
Because it really boils down our true identity into a single statement. It's like a constant reminder that we're not just these physical bodies, but eternal souls.
Okay, so we've got the self, we've got the Father, and then it introduces The drama, the world play, and the creation cycle.
Right. And it says that we, the listeners, we're starting to understand this cycle and the one who created it.
So can you paint a picture of this drama for us? Like, what's going on in this cosmic play?
Okay, picture this.
Yep.
A grand play that unfolds over huge stretches of time. And it's cyclical, right? So it starts with this golden age of like total purity and happiness.
Sounds idyllic.
It is. Then it gradually descends, right? Silver Age, Copper Age, and then finally the Iron Age, which is, well, where we are now. Lots of impurity, lots of suffering.
Not so idyllic.
Not so much. But the good news is, through this period of transformation, the Confluence Age, things start turning back towards the Golden Age.
So we're in that turning point now.
We are, and the reflection is saying that now we're starting to see the whole cycle, and understand the one who's running the show, the Supreme Soul, the director.
That's quite a realization.
Yeah.
But the reflection also points out that even, like, really learned people, scholars, experts, often miss this understanding.
Right, and it even says they're often proud of their knowledge, too.
Why do you think that is? Why this disconnect?
I think it's because, worldly knowledge focuses so much on the external world. It's all about facts and information, which is great, but it doesn't always dig into the spiritual side of things. It's like having a map of a city, but not knowing who you are or where you really want to go.
Right. Or even why you're in the city in the first place.
Exactly.
So then the reflection talks about knowledge, devotion, and detachment, suggesting that their true meanings are often, like, misunderstood.
Yeah.
Even by, people who have renounced the world and everything.
It's like these words get thrown around a lot, but their true essence is often lost.
What are the deeper meanings here?
Well, it says that true knowledge isn't just about gathering information, it's about self-realization, understanding who you are as a soul. And true devotion, it's not just rituals and outward worship, it's about like a deep connection with the Supreme Soul.
From the heart.
Yeah, exactly. And detachment, it's not just about renouncing possessions or whatever, it's about detaching your awareness, not being controlled by desires.
Inner freedom.
Inner freedom, exactly. Not being a slave to your senses.
So you can still live in the world, you can still have things.
Exactly. It's about your inner state.
Interesting. And then it brings up the disputes at the Kumela.
Oh, yeah. As an example of, like, how even religious figures can get caught up in Deyabiman.
Body consciousness.
Yeah. So you have all these people who, in many ways are very dedicated to spiritual pursuits, but then they're arguing over status and precedence at the Kumela. It shows how deeply ingrained body consciousness can be, even in spiritual settings.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this whole idea of shifting to soul consciousness just keeps coming up.
It's like the core message here.
And the reflection really stresses the Father's instruction to, abandon body consciousness and consider yourself a soul.
It's the key to everything.
Okay, so what are some of the, immediate benefits of making this shift?
Well, when you start identifying as a soul, you start tapping into those inherent qualities, peace, love, power.
Right, those original qualities we talked about earlier.
Yeah. You become less reactive to negativity, less fearful, less angry.
More peaceful, more loving.
Exactly.
Okay, the reflection also talks about the soul becoming kankai, fallen, and accumulating shu impurities.
It happens to all of us. It's part of the cycle.
So what causes this, spiritual decline?
Yeah, forgetting who we really are. Getting lost in the world and all its desires, the physical stuff, the relationships.
So we start identifying with those things instead of the soul.
Yeah. And then the negative thoughts, the selfish actions, they all act like impurities. They kind of dim the soul's light.
Okay. And then it talks about becoming either sadopradhan or tamopradhan.
Right. Those are like the two ends of the spectrum.
So walk us through those.
Okay, so satopradhan means the soul is, super pure and elevated. It's when you're constantly remembering the divine and you're really working on shedding those negative tendencies.
And tamopradhan is the opposite.
Yeah, the soul is heavy with impurities. You're basically, lost in the darkness.
And it uses the example of Krishna, his beautiful soul and body. What's the connection there?
It's saying that when the soul is pure, like Krishna's was, in his original state, that purity radiates outwards. It manifests even in the physical form.
It's like an inner light.
Exactly. The kashish, that magnetism, that beauty, it comes from the soul.
And then it contrasts Krishna as a pure child with Lakshmi and Narayan.
Right. It's pointing out that a soul in its initial purity, like a young child, has this unique radiance. It's like pure and unblemished.
Unsullied by the world.
Yeah. And while Lakshmi and Narayan are, super pure deities of the Golden Age, They represent a later stage in the cycle where the soul has, experienced more. The emphasis is on that original untainted purity.
Like a pristine diamond.
Exactly.
Okay. And then it makes this interesting comparison between a child and a Mahatma.
Right. It's saying they share that same purity.
But they get there in different ways.
Totally. A child's purity is natural. It's just there.
But a Mahatma, they've had to work for it.
They've had to overcome challenges, purify their thoughts and actions. It's a journey.
So now the reflection moves to the father's role. Teacher, guide, guru.
He wears a lot of hats.
He does.
Yeah.
What are his main functions here?
Well, first and foremost, he reminds us who we truly are, right? He's the one who wakes us up from this dream of body consciousness.
That's huge.
It is. And he teaches us about the whole creation cycle, the beginning, middle, and end. And he guides us back to our original state of purity.
Back to the source.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the reflection also addresses this common phrase, Bhagavanurvacha, God speaks, which is often attributed to Krishna in the Gita.
Right, and it questions whether Krishna would be called Baba or Patit Pavan.
Interesting. So why that distinction?
Because, Krishna is a deity, right? He's part of the cycle. The father, the Baba, the Patit Pavan, he's outside of that. He's the one who creates the cycle.
Makes sense.
And when people yearn for the Patit Pavan, the purifier of the fallen, it's that supreme being they're remembering, not specifically Krishna.
Okay. And it talks about the Father revealing the true essence of all scriptures. How does he do that?
Well, he's the source of all knowledge, right?
Yeah, right.
So he can clear up any misunderstandings about the scriptures. He gives us the true interpretation, the original meaning.
And the core teachings, it says, are really simple. Understand yourself as a soul and remember the Father.
That's it. Two simple but powerful principles.
And the reflection then goes into this whole concept of the brother-sister relationship of souls.
Oh, yeah, that's a key idea.
Yeah, so can you unpack that a bit for us?
Well, at the most fundamental level, we're all souls, right?
Right.
Children of the same Father.
The Supreme Soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that makes us all spiritual brothers and sisters. We might have different roles in the world, different bodies, but ultimately, we're all part of this one big spiritual family.
But it mentions some people have trouble grasping this. And they bring up the question of God being omnipresent if he's also the Father.
Yeah, it can seem a bit tricky to reconcile those ideas.
So how does it work? How is he both a personal father and omnipresent?
Well, think of it like this. The Supreme Soul is the Father of all souls. But that doesn't mean he's physically present everywhere,
Right.
He has his own abode, but his influence, his love, his energy, that's everywhere.
It's like the sun.
Perfect analogy. The sun itself is in one place, but its light and heat reach everywhere.
Okay, I like that. And then it talks about us, the listeners, as being grandchildren with a right to the inheritance.
It's like a spiritual lineage.
So how does that work?
Well, the Supreme Father is the ultimate source,
That's
right?
grandparent.
Exactly. And Brahma is considered the first soul to reconnect with the father in this cycle. So he's like the grandfather.
And we're the grandkids.
Exactly. And we inherit the spiritual wealth that's passed down through this lineage.
Interesting. And it emphasizes this, like brother, brother, soul to soul, vision, looking beyond gender, all that.
That's so important. It's about recognizing the soul in everyone and treating each other with that same respect and understanding that we'd have for our actual siblings. It helps to create that spiritual unity and dissolve the ego that comes with body consciousness.
Makes sense. And then it connects the fact that both men and women call God Father to this idea of being siblings.
It's a simple observation, but it's powerful, right? If we all acknowledge the same being as our Father, then it follows that we're all part of the same family.
Right. Regardless of gender or anything else.
Exactly.
Okay. So then the reflection moves to the Father needing a mouth to speak in the physical world. Why is a medium considered necessary?
Well, the Supreme Soul is formless, right?
Right. Pure energy.
Exactly. So to communicate in the physical world, he needs a physical instrument, a mouth to speak through.
It makes sense when you put it that way.
Right. It's like we need a translator to understand a language we don't know.
And it uses the example of the Gaumuk, the cow's mouth, as a parallel.
Oh, yeah, which in some traditions represents this source of pure water.
Symbolizing the flow of knowledge.
Exactly. And this reflection equates true Amrit, true nectar, not with water, but with that spiritual knowledge coming directly from the Father.
Okay. And then Brahma is identified as the Gaumata, the cow mother. What's the significance of that?
Well, the Gaumata is a powerful symbol,
Nurturing, life-giving.
Exactly. So Brahma, as the instrument through whom the Father speaks, becomes this spiritual mother who nourishes us with that wisdom.
Interesting. So then it talks about our identity as Brahma Kumars and Kumaris.
The children of Brahma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what does this mean for our relationships with each other?
Well, it's a deep bond. We're all spiritual brothers and sisters.
That's like a spiritual family.
Yeah. And it implies that we should treat each other accordingly, with respect, with purity, with love.
Right. It even says criminal assault should not occur between them.
Yeah, that's how serious it is.
Ah.
Any act of impurity or harm within the spiritual family is a betrayal of that bond.
It's a huge deal.
It is. It all comes down to forgetting who we really are.
Forgetting that we're souls, forgetting that we're family.
Exactly.
Okay. The reflection also acknowledges that, there will be obstacles, challenges from those with, what it calls asuri sampradaya, a demonic nature.
Right. Those who are attached to auditory vices.
So who are these people in this context?
Well, it's not about demonizing anyone,
Right. It's not about literal demons.
Exactly. It's more about those tendencies within ourselves and in the world, the lust, the anger, the greed.
All those negative qualities.
Yeah, that keep us stuck in darkness, keep us from evolving.
So those tendencies can create challenges for those of us who are, trying to become more pure, more spiritual.
Absolutely. It's
Right.
like a constant pullback towards the old ways.
Right. And it reminds us that we receive our inheritance from the Father and that we have to follow his shrimat, his elevated directions, to become pure.
Right. It's the path back to our original state.
So what are those guiding principles, those shrimats?
Well, it's all about soul consciousness, remembering the divine, practicing purity in thought, word, and deed, selfless service, all those things that uplift us and connect us back to the source.
Okay, so then the conversation turns to the end of the Iron Age and the cycle of time. And it says that this is the last birth of this impure world of death. What comes next?
Well, according to this perspective, the Iron Age is coming to an end.
Good news.
And it will be followed by the Amarlok, the immortal world, which is essentially the Golden Age, a realm of perfect purity and peace and happiness, free from all the suffering and negativity of this current age.
A new beginning.
Exactly.
Okay. And it contrasts the Sato Pradhan Sampurna Nirvikari, the totally pure, viceless state of deities in the Golden Age, with the Tamo Pradhan Sampurna Vikari, the totally impure state of the present world.
Right. It's like night and day. It's emphasizing that huge swing in consciousness throughout the cycle.
Yeah. It's a stark difference.
It is.
And then it brings up this common saying about deities being completely viceless, while humans are sinful.
Yeah. And in this view, that saying is like a collective memory, a memory of the Golden Age when beings were truly pure.
Right. So we still have that sense that there was a time of perfect purity.
Exactly. But then as the cycle went on, those qualities diminished, leading to where we are now.
Right. So then it talks about the cycle of Hearth India being first worshipped and then becoming our Kanparta worship.
Yeah, it's this idea that in the Golden Age, Heart was the land of deities, right? They were the ones being worshipped.
Right.
But then, as purity declined, their descendants lost that elevated status, and eventually they became the worshippers. They started worshiping their ancestors, worshiping other deities.
This is a reversal.
It is. But the interesting thing is that this reflection is suggesting that in this confluence age, some souls are becoming puja again, They're regaining that elevated status through their spiritual transformation.
That's quite a thought.
It is.
So then it talks about how the influence of Daitan devotion is really strong these days.
Right, with all the rituals and prayers.
And the devotees are asking God to grant them the fruits of their devotion.
Yeah. Which makes sense, it's a natural desire. But the reflection is highlighting the difference between that and the path of knowledge,
Yeah.
Devotion is about asking, pleading, hoping. But the path of knowledge is about understanding. It's about direct experience. And that leads to a much deeper and more lasting sense of fulfillment.
Okay, that makes sense. So the reflection then touches on the four main religious scriptures and the establishment of Brahmanism. And it describes deityism as encompassing Brahmins, deities, and warriors.
Right. So in this context, deityism is basically the religion of the deities, which originated in those pure early ages, the golden and silver ages.
Okay.
And the Brahmins, deities, and warriors, they were the main players in that world order.
And it explains that the Chadar crest of Brahmins is the Sangam Yuga, the confluence age.
Yeah.
Why is this time so significant for Brahmins?
Well, the Sangam Yuga is when the Supreme Father descends, right?
Right.
And he establishes the Brahmin Dharma, the Brahmin way of life. So the Brahmins of this age, they're the ones who are receiving this knowledge directly. They're the pioneers, you could say.
They're the ones paving the way.
Exactly.
Okay. And the reflection points out that the listener, as a Brahmin, is becoming most elevated. What does that mean?
It means they're on the fast track to becoming a deity, you know? By embracing this knowledge, by practicing soul consciousness, they're reaching the highest spiritual state.
And it explains the cycle of becoming Brahmin and then deity. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So in the confluence age, souls adopt this Brahmin way of life. They study, they practice, they serve. And through that, they purify themselves. They become Satapratan. And when the golden age arrives, they become the deities of that new world.
So it's a transformation.
It is, from human to deity.
And even present-day Brahmins, the reflection says, even they often bow to these Sangam Yuga Brahmins. Why do you think that is?
I think there's this deep, almost subconscious recognition of those original Brahmins, the ones who are directly connected to the source. Even if the understanding has become, a bit distorted over time, that respect remains.
It's in the blood.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, so the reflection then praises the listener as
Right.
Porzelon Cortonton Talis, increased most noes, praised as world mothers. That's quite an honorific.
It is, and I think it speaks to the nurturing, creative energy of those who embrace this knowledge.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are helping to birth a new, more spiritual world.
Mothers of a new age.
Exactly. And it goes on to say that moving beyond limitations into the unlimited makes each person untine, world mother, world father.
So we embody both.
We do. We embody those qualities of nurturing, guiding, providing.
And then it highlights the importance of spiritual service. What does that look like in practice?
It's about serving others from a place of soul consciousness,
Right.
sharing knowledge, offering support, spreading those vibrations of peace and love, helping others to awaken to their own spiritual potential.
Beautiful. Okay, and then the reflection talks about this spiritual war, this Vin, and it describes the listener as part of an army.
An army of light. Yeah. And it mentions these symbolic figures.
Yeah. Chad the Hoary.
Right. Who are like the different forces at play in this whole transformation process.
Okay, so who's who?
Well, the Yadavs, I think they represent those forces that are, attached to the old ways, kind of stuck in self-destruction.
Okay.
The Kauravas, they're like the negative tendencies, the vices, both within us and in the world.
Okay.
And then the Pandavas, they're the souls that are striving for truth, for purity, for righteousness. They're the ones aligned with the divine.
So it's like an epic battle between good and evil.
Kind of. But it's important to remember that this war isn't against actual people,
Right.
It's not about fighting our physical brothers and sisters. It's about conquering those negative forces that ravem within ourselves and in the world.
Right. So who or what is Rivan in this context?
Well, traditionally, he's depicted with 10 heads, right?
Right.
And those represent the 10 main vices. Lust, anger, greed, attachment, ego, all that stuff. So the real battle is against those vices. It's about purifying ourselves.
Okay, and the reflection emphasizes this need to detach from the body.
Yeah.
From those physical relationships, all those attachments. Why is that so important?
Because those attachments are what keep us trapped in this cycle of suffering.
Right.
They fuel our desires, our fears, our ego. To become truly free, to realize our potential as deities, we have to loosen our grip on all that.
Let go of what's weighing us down.
Exactly.
And it contrasts the old world with the Ioguru, the immortal world. What are the key differences?
Well, the old world is all about scarcity, right? Competition for resources, conflict, all driven by ego and desire. But the Amarlok, the Golden Age, is a world of abundance.
Everything we need is provided.
Exactly, because the consciousness is different. People are living in harmony with each other and with nature.
Right.
It mentions the limited population of the Golden Age.
Why is that?
Because only the purest souls get to go there, the ones who've done the work, who have purified themselves.
So it's a select group.
Yeah. And the environment is harmonious because those souls are living in alignment with divine principles. There's no negativity, no pollution, just peace and balance.
Sounds amazing.
It is.
The reflection then compares this present era to hell, and the future golden age to can heaven. But it says the cycle starts in the middle. What does that mean?
Well, it's a cyclical view, right?
Right, not linear.
Exactly. So heaven and hell aren't fixed destinations, they're phases in this cycle. We start in the middle with heaven, the golden age, then we gradually descend into hell, the iron age, and then back to heaven again.
It's a constant flow.
It is.
And then it explains the descent of the deities into the kind of the path of indulgence.
Oh, yeah. So even the deities, they're not immune to the cycle.
Right, they're not static.
Yeah, exactly. Over time, they lose their original purity. They get caught up in worldly desires, and eventually that leads to the darkness of the Iron Age.
It's a gradual decline.
It is.
Okay. Then it talks about the double and single crown. What do those represent?
So the double crown is for the deities of the Golden and Silver Ages.
Okay.
They're both spiritually pure, and they rule the world, so they're like doubly crowned.
Right.
But as the cycle progresses, purity declines.
Right.
And the rulers are left with only the single crown, the crown of earthly power, but they've lost that spiritual authority.
So it's like a degradation of, not just spiritual power, but also like earthly power.
Exactly.